Good morning, everyone. I'm Mike Adams. I am Impact and Evaluation and Process Management for the Missouri Small Business Development Centers here in Columbia, Missouri. I also liaison with Rob's group and on workforce development. And today we're going to be talking about competitive compensation and benefit programs. And Rob, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. It's good to be here. I'm Rob Russell. I'm an assistant extension professor in the Truman School of Government and Public Affairs at Mizzou. And I'm also the director of Extension's Labor and Workforce Development Program.
Excellent. So again, we're going to talk about compensation and benefits. We're not really going to get into kind of business model type things. We're going to talk about how you can compete with local companies such as yourself on how to compete with compensation and benefits to attract employees. This is all going to just kind of an introduction. This is all kind of tie back to yesterday's presentation and then tomorrow's presentation. So they're all a little bit linked. I'm just going to put that out there right now so that you understand where we're going with this. So compensation is total cash and non-cash payments for your employees. Obviously, when we think compensation, we think of the hourly or salary that we pay that employee. It could be, again, hourly rate, salary, commission plus salary, base salary, overtime wages. For the restaurant industry, tips. We can talk about bonuses, and we can talk about merit pay. So it covers a wide spectrum of what that means is when we talk about compensation. And when we talk about benefits, the first thing that comes to mind is health insurance, but it also is that vacation, that sick, that PTO, however you want to structure that. PTO can be here, so you can structure it to where you have this many days of vacation a year, this many days of sick time a year, bereavement pay if a close family member passes away. But you could also do what's called PTO, which means you've got 30 hours a year to use for paid time off. It doesn't matter if it's sick, personal time, vacation, whatever it may be. So that's another way you can structure that. And then retirement plans, obviously, there's most retirement plans, the employer will put in X amount percentage of the paycheck, and then the employee will put in X amount per paycheck. But it can, it can go either way. Sometimes there are some employers. I had an employer that paid for my entire retirement plan. But then I've had employers that, they put in a little bit and then I put in a little bit as well. Another really good one is stock options or the buy-in options, meaning that you have a little bit of footing in the company. So at the end of the year, you may get a bonus on your stock options. Or, you may have just maybe at some point, you are part owner of the company. So that's another option. And then other non-cash benefits that we're going to get into a little bit better on the more kind of creative side of what it means for compensation.
So as we all know, compensation matters, right? And I like to think of compensation as sort of an entry point for a lot of employees into a company. And there's some research out there that says that as people are looking for jobs, 67% of job seekers look for salary figures in their job ads, right? So they want to know what compensation looks like. But almost an equally high percent also is looking for information on benefits, right? So are you providing health insurance? Are you providing a retirement plan? What does that look like here? 59% of folks also look for information on location. So things like, can they work remotely? When are they expected to work? Where are they expected to work? And so what we see overall is that for employees, compensation is one of those entry points to evaluate job opportunities, to decide whether or not they're going to be looking at those jobs. And then it is also a way that they look to determine whether or not they're going to stay. But we do know that employees increasingly are looking at total compensation packages and not just salaries, right? So it's not just, okay, you're going to be paying me $50,000 a year. That's great. and providing nothing else. It's going to be, okay, what does that pay? What does that retirement plan look like? What does that health insurance look like? Because people recognize that those other benefits are a part of their compensation, whether they are direct current compensation or whether they are deferred compensation down the road. We also know that it's not all about the money, right? That for a lot of employees that, yes, money matters, and that's going to be a key part here, but some research is out there from PayScale, which is a company that surveyed 500,000 employees in an employee engagement survey, and they actually say that pay perception matters more than the exact dollar amounts. And they found that employee satisfaction is driven more by the feeling that the approach to pay is fair and transparent. So it's very clear what you're going to get paid, how you're going to move forward, how your pay increases, things like that. They also found that employees actually typically don't know the market rate very well, right? So we'll talk about how to determine what the market looks like and things like that. But a lot of employees perceive themselves as being underpaid regardless of what the actual market is going to say out there. And they're going to be looking for jobs if they perceive themselves as being underpaid. So that's something that you have to think about as a business owner in terms of approaching these issues of compensation. The number one issue that employees are actually looking for, that these are current employees, is they are actually looking for appreciation. The employees who feel appreciated, who feel that they are valued at work, are more satisfied and less likely to leave than employees who feel like they are undervalued, not appreciated, they are not heard, things like that. So that's not direct compensation, it's not a dollar value, right? But it is something that employee is receiving in exchange for the work that they are doing there. And then the other thing, the second biggest issue that they found that employees wanted is they wanted to stay at what they perceive to be rising companies. And so they're more likely to take a hometown discount or some sort of or less likely to look for another job if they perceive that there's a bright future at the company that they're working for. But if they're working at a place that they don't perceive the future is bright, or it's uncertain, or there's questions about what that future looks like, then they are more likely to leave from that company. The second thing, the research, and this comes from a 2016 study here that was cited in Fast Company magazine. But as we look at what job seekers are actually looking for, according to LinkedIn, that 2/3 of respondents wanted to know about a company's culture and values above all else when considering changing jobs. So as you're thinking about compensation, part of what you have to signal in this process is the values that you have as a company. And as you do that, employees are paying attention. One of the things that the article talked about is that employees are oftentimes, they're more interested in understanding gender pay gaps and how you're seeking to address that. They're more concerned about equity than they are just their direct compensation. And so as we think about what we are talking about, compensation matters, but you can't focus entirely just on the dollar amount. You have to think about the package and how this is put together in terms of an overall image and perspective of what your business is to look as a place to work and as a place for employees to be valued.
So Rob, if I can hop on that last one.
Yeah.
For those that were on yesterday, I gave a personal story where I went to work for a startup company, and I was making very little money, but I believed in them and they believed in me. And so I stayed around because I knew that at some point it was going to succeed, and it did. And so that is very, very important to have that understanding between the two.
So how do you put together a competitive compensation package? Now, a couple of things that come to mind as a part of this. I mean, first of all, as you're thinking about it from a business perspective, the ability to pay is key, right? And what can you afford to do? And that's a question you have to ask yourself. You have to think about as both a strategic matter in terms of what your finances look like, but also as a strategic matter in terms of who you want to hire and what sort of employee you are looking to bring on to the company there. Money doesn't necessarily correlate to the best employees, but it typically attracts different groups here. So you have to think through what can you afford as a business, what makes sense from a business perspective there. The second thing you need to be thinking about is how do you structure that compensation package, right? And one of the things I did in a previous life is I worked in labor relations, and in the labor relations conversation, when you're negotiating with unions and employers, the conversation focuses on base pay, it focuses on benefits, and it focuses on other issues that you have to approach there. But as you think about the compensation package, from an employer perspective, it was always thinking about that total compensation, right? So if you are putting more money into health insurance, then that means there's less money available in that compensation area for wage increases, for example. If you put money under the base wage increase, then then that means that any increases that are going on to health insurance are going to be, the employee's going to have to eat more of that cost. And so thinking about how you structure this in a way that makes sense for you and that is competitive is a key part of the conversation there. And then the third thing I always say that is often overlooked, and I think this is where the SBDC is a key partner in this conversation, is thinking through your business model and figuring out what advantages you can create in your business in order to compete on compensation. And the pictures I have here are 3 intentionally chosen pictures of companies that where labor costs are higher than average, but they are highly profitable businesses and they've grown considerably over the years. And they have figured out other ways to make money. And so the one that you see on top, and these are all probably very well known, but Southwest Airlines, out there, labor accounts for over 1/3 of their total costs. And the second biggest cost they have is fuel. But they actually will say that the most critical element of their success is that they have achieved higher labor productivity than their competitors do. So they've figured out how to get more work out of the people that they've hired for the wages that they're paying. And they do this in a couple of ways here. They've actually increased utilization of their fixed costs higher. So they actually get more flights out of their planes a day than their competitors do. They control their second biggest cost, which is fuel, through a hedging strategy. And then they've figured out how to create a culture of cooperation so that that job classifications are more fluid at Southwest Airlines than a lot of other airlines there. That by encouraging cooperation, they're able to turn around planes faster. Customers have a better customer service experience, and they are incredibly profitable there. They are the most heavily unionized airline in the U.S., and their salary rates at the same time are above average when compared to the U.S. airline industry. So they figured out a different business model. Quick Trips are another company that is often held out there. That they actually pay very good wages for folks in that industry. Their starting pay for folks that are there is in the $40,000 to $50,000 a year range. But if you sit and watch a Quick Trip and pay attention to what they're doing in their business, they don't brand their gasolines. They are actually doing they're actually figuring out how to maximize their gasoline profit. Then they sell an incredible amount of stuff inside the store that has higher markups there. And the same thing with Costco, right? So as you think about compensation, part of what you have to think about is how do you structure your business in a way to, as I like to say, it's not about, we oftentimes think it's about minimizing labor costs. Rather, I say it's about controlling labor costs, but doing so in a competitive way that allows you to attract people that will serve your company. The second thing you have to think about as you're putting together a competitive compensation package is your market demands. In the market, I would say you need to pay attention to 2 different areas. And we're going to talk about how to figure out some of this information through publicly available resources in a few minutes here. But you have to think about what does your regional labor market looks like. And so you have to be able to determine what that regional labor market is. And that's understanding where people are commuting to, where they're coming from, who the major employers are, what does the pay rate look like for those employers. And so understanding what that is and where you want to fit within that regional labor market. But then you also have to think about your industry-based labor market, because as you're hiring people, there are jobs, and increasingly so we see this, that skilled labor, whether that is with a 4-year degree, with a PhD, with an apprenticeship program, whether it is skills that you can demonstrate that you have, that skilled labor is in demand, and employers are willing to go long distances to poach that labor if that person can provide things for you. So you have to think about what does the industry going rate look like, and how do you compete within your industry there. So how do you find out some of this information? We're going to talk about some of these sources here, but there are 2 primary types of sources that are available for folks to look through and for business owners to understand. There are proprietary sources of information. These are sources of information that cost you money to get access to, but they provide oftentimes more real-time information. So they are updating things as information is available. They are using other sources to get information, and they are providing you a real-time look at the labor market and what information is out there. So there are companies that specialize in providing information about compensation and analyzing compensation. PayScale is one of those, but there are others out there. And secondly, there are companies that provide information on job searches and other labor market information. And we'll talk about one of them and give you an example later. A company called Burning Glass, which essentially scours the online job ads and then aggregates that information into a lot of different ways of looking at what's available out there in the online environment. That said, there are a whole lot of public sources of information that I think for a lot of business owners can at least provide a starting point. And we're going to talk about what those look like also. These are free sources of information, which is one of the great things about them. They are publicly available. Anybody can access them. The downside oftentimes is that the information is oftentimes delayed. So you are one of the ones that we'll be talking about. You're getting information from 2018, 2019. So it's not real-time information. It's not terribly old, but it's not information from the last month or the last 3 months or the last 6 months, something like that. And sometimes information is also suppressed. And so and we can talk about what that is, but what that basically means is that in the public collecting of statistics about employment, that if that information would allow people to determine information about individual employers, then these agencies will suppress that information, meaning you cannot get access to it even though they have it there. And so we see that oftentimes more so in smaller counties than we do in larger counties, but it is something to be aware of as you were thinking through this information. So the first one we want to talk about comes from the Missouri Economic Research and Information Center, or MERIC, which is a state agency, and their Occupational Employment and Wages tool. This is a federal state cooperative effort between MERIC and the Bureau of Labor Statistics that produces employment and wage estimates for about 800 different occupations. It produces those estimates across the country, but you can figure them out at a metropolitan area scale. You can figure them out at a workforce board scale, or you can figure that information out at a statewide scale. And what this helps us to do is understand by occupation what are the going wage rates within those fields here. And I've got the link up there. If you look up MERIC, MERIC.mo.gov and look up their occupation employment wages information, you can get access to it also. And here's a screenshot of what this looks like. So you go on here, you get this, you can select an area. So you can select Missouri. You can select a region, which is going to be by workforce region for the most part, though they aggregate the workforce boards in St. Louis and Kansas City, or you can select metropolitan area. Then you can select an occupation. You have to figure it out by a major group, excuse me, a minor group, and then a specific occupation. And then you select year, and you can choose to look at annual wages or hourly wages. And so I did this just for a sample type of occupation out there. So I looked up customer service representatives as an occupation. You do that through office staff. You look through, and then you come up with a minor occupation, and then this is the specific occupation. And they can give you information by hourly wage or an annual wage. And so we can see, looking at the Jefferson City Metropolitan Statistical Area, so that's Cole, Callaway, Osage, and Montauk counties. They estimate that there are 1,600 people employed as customer service representatives. The annual mean wage for that employee is about $34,500 a year, so a little bit under $35,000 a year. The 25th percentile for those employees is $26,750, and the 75th percentile is $40,270. Or you can translate that to an hourly wage of a mean of $16.50 an hour, 25th percentile about almost $13 an hour, and a 75th percentile of $20 an hour. Now, what they will tell you is that those percentiles don't necessarily correspond to entry level versus experienced wages there. That it could mean that there are a number of employers that don't pay well in the industry, so they are suppressing wages, or there are a series of employers that are paying very well and they enhance the wages there. But it provides you a kind of a guideline of what this wage curve looks like, if you want to think about it that way, what the mean wage is for your that area, but also what might be perceived as an entry level and an experienced level wage in terms of what people are willing to be paid and what that looks like within the area. Now, the one downside to this information is this is just wages, and that's this publicly available information does look at only wages there. It doesn't have total compensation information available. So it doesn't help in terms of the benefit packages and things like that, but it can help you understand if your wages are in the ballpark. And so this, again, is kind of looking at it by occupation. Oops. A second tool that's out there that's publicly available is what's called the MoScores tool. And it's a tool provided by the state of Missouri through the Office of Workforce Development and the Department of Higher Education and Workforce Development that provides information about educational programs and the outcomes of those programs. And so if you go to scorecard.mo.gov/search, you can actually search for educational programs to figure out what they have available and what that looks like going forward here. So here's what the search screen looks like. I will warn you, if you go to this website, it's a bit clunky in terms of the search and how it appears there. And so don't get discouraged if it doesn't come up immediately. It takes some time for it to work and for it to appear. but you can search by school and program, you can search by location, and you can filter then by things that are programs that are offered online. They are WIOA approved, they have apprenticeship programs, things like that. And so you can do comparisons as a part of this also, so it does help out in different areas. And so I did this again for a program that I know has some information available. And so this is State Fair Community College's Manufacturing Technology Associate's degree, which with the focus on welding technology. There's a whole lot of information you can get about the program, but as a business owner that's thinking about compensation, what is probably of interest to you is this section right here that's focusing on first year earnings. And so what that is telling you here is that based on the information that they have, and this is from a few years old, it's 2015 and 2017, that the state median of similar types of programs with associate's degrees that focus on welding is $38,106. But if you are in urban areas, $39,188, in rural areas, $34,862. But if you're talking about graduates from State Fair, their median earning was $38,720. So half of the folks are getting paid above that, half of the folks are getting paid below that. But it helps give you an idea of what that wage range looks like for graduates of that program. This tool also allows you to compare different programs. And so I just did a comparison for the same program at State Fair as opposed to East Central College, the State Technical College of Missouri, and Ozarks Tech. Again, thinking about the Jeff City area with welding tech, where might you recruit folks from? And you can get both the employment rate here. So 92% of their graduates at State Fair are employed, 100% at East Central, 90% at State Tech, and 71% at Ozarks Tech are employed there. You can get information about the median earnings of graduates for each of those programs. This is the first year median. And so we see that East Central's median is about $1,500 higher than State Fair. State Tech is comparable to East Central, and Ozarks Tech, their median earnings are significantly lower there. So it's again kind of gives you some idea of what people graduating from different educational institutions are expecting to earn within that area. The final tool I want to talk about, again, that provides some publicly available data to help you understand what the competitive environment looks like, is going to focus on that regional labor market a little bit more. So if the first one focuses on industry and occupation that we gave, the occupational and employment statistics scorecard, the second tool focuses on what people that are graduating from certain programs, what their wages look like. This kind of really focuses, these two tools will focus on what are people getting paid within that particular region, within that particular area, and it allows you to kind of see that. So it's a tool that's developed by the Economic Development Administration, or the US EDA, and Indiana University. It's called Stats America, and they have a whole bunch of different pieces of information that you can look at here. They provide broad economic data focused on different geographies, but the two I'm going to highlight here are the USA Counties and Profile tool, and then what they call the Big Radius tool. So if we look at the Counties and Profile tool, you can go in there, you can look at a particular county, and they will provide that allows you information that allows you to better comprehend work in that county. And it will also allow you to do a side-by-side comparison to see how different counties compare. So I just did this for Cole County. You can get population out of this. You can see what sort of growth they have, the number of households, the labor force in terms of people. So Cole County has 76,000 people in the county, but about 40,000 in the labor force within that area. The unemployment rates here, you can see that per capita personal income in Cole County in 2019 is $48,000 a year. The median household income, $61,000 a year, and about 10% of folks live in poverty. You can look at information about the educational attainment, but then covered employment. So people who are working there, and what are the average wages per job. So again, this doesn't provide specific information about every job, but you can see that people who are covered by the information that are reporting this information to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, that the average wage per job in Cole County is $43,000. And so that again, high paying jobs and low paying jobs will sort of can potentially skew that average a little bit. That's not a median, that can be skewed, but we can get an idea that in Cole County, that if you're looking to be an average around $43,000 a year is what people are getting paid there. But if you have particular industries that you're looking at, including they look at manufacturing, transportation and warehousing, healthcare, social assistance, and finance and insurance, so you can get a better idea of what those industries are paying there. So manufacturing, the average wage per job in manufacturing in Cole County is actually slightly higher than the average wage for the county at $46,000. almost 47,000. Transportation and warehousing is right at the average for all jobs in Cole County. Healthcare and social assistance is higher. Again, that's probably skewed by doctors that are making high salaries and a little bit pulled up that way, but you get an idea of what that looks like there. And then we know that finance and insurance, if you're working in that space, your average wage in the county is much higher than what the county average is. And so again, it kind of gives you some idea of what that looks like. And as you can compare counties, you can then see about, what do folks in Osage County make relative to Cole County? What do people in Montauk County? What do people in Boone County make? And you can start to put together that regional comparison to understand what, as a region, people are making in these both in terms of average wages, but also in terms of these key industries here. The other tool is what they call the big radius tool, and I like this one quite a bit here. And it provides broad economic information that allows you to better comprehend work in a broader geographic area. And you can select everything from 25 miles to 500 miles. And so there's a big radius. I mean, it is a big radius, right? 500-mile radius means that you're going to be covering well outside the state of Missouri. So I looked at this for 25 miles, again, centered on Cole County here. And again, they provide a whole bunch of information here, but what's of interest, I think, for business owners is by looking by broad industry here, by NAICS industries, you can look at employment and you can figure out how many people are employed in those areas, what percent of the labor market looks at this, but then you can see the annualized earnings per job and how those relate to the total earnings, right? So in Cole County, not surprisingly, the biggest employer is public administration, being a center of state government. Not quite 1 out of every 4 jobs are involved in public administration, and those jobs pay slightly higher than the annualized earnings per job. So they pay about 103% of the annualized earnings per job. Accommodation and food services, on the other hand, their annualized earnings per job are 17,500 roughly, or about 38% of that rate. And you can look at this and get this information for a much broader scope of industries to figure out what in those industries those wage rates look like. Now, again, it's not going to give you information about individual jobs. It's not going to give you information about what a welder working in manufacturing in Cole County makes, but it will allow you to get at least a base idea about what by industry people are making, what that workforce and what that job area looks like within the area there. All right. Sorry, I was looking at the questions there. Mike, I want to turn it over to you to talk about burning glass. I probably need to stop sharing my screen, right?
Yeah, if you can share so I can share my screen, that'd be great. And my screen just went out. Okay, there we go. All right. So we also have a proprietary tool that we pay for the SBDC called Burning Glass Labor Insight. And if you're a client of the SBDC, we can run some reports for you that can kind of give you more insight into what you're looking for as far as compensation, benefits, hiring, retention, things like that. So we can do it by many different types. We can do it by industry. We can do it by occupation. We can do related jobs. I mean, we have a lot of different ways that we can run this data and run reports for you to kind of help you make decisions. So if we want to look at an industry, my default location right now is Missouri, but we can drill it down to the metro area, the county, the city, whatever we are looking for. And then we can select an industry. In this case, I'll just pick something. I'll just pick, let's see, educational services. Apply the filter. Takes a second. So for educational services, you can see in Missouri at this time, there are 25,000 job postings. One thing I want to point out, the public facing sites that Rob was showing, as he said, are usually about 2 to 3 years behind on their data. This is real time within 24 hours. It's a spider network that scours job postings across the country, across the world, across wherever it may be, across Missouri, across the county. and then compares all that data in real time. So we can see right now at this point, there's 25,000 openings. The unemployment rate in that industry is 2.2%. And then we can look over here. Let me move you guys a little bit. Okay. Of how the employment has been doing over the last few years. But the main thing that we're talking about a little bit more today, of course, is salary. So we can look at, okay, so here is the lowest salary is going to be $10,000. That's going to be probably some sort of aid. But a teacher or some other educational service provider is going to make about $42,000 in the state of Missouri. And then it increases after that. And this is going to be based on education experience. And then we can look at the actual salary by education. So if they just have a high school vocational training, they're going to make about $29,000. Associate's degree is going to be higher. Bachelor's obviously going to be higher. And then master's and doctoral, PhD. And then we can also look at it by experience. So 0 to 2 years, they're going to start at around 34,000, 35,000. But once they get to that 3 to 5 year range, 47,000, and then it increases after that. And we can also look at it over here. So, and this is more of, you know, how many folks in the field have this level of experience. Let's see. We can look at demographics. You know, are we hiring people 25 to 35 years old? Probably 35 to 45. Pretty a little higher, and then it goes, you know, we can look at the age groups that we're hiring. We can look at what kind of occupations that are in that industry. We can see who's hiring. See, Washington University has a lot of openings right now, so you can see the competitive balance if you're in that field. And then where in the state. I don't know, this is kind of hard to see, but you can see where in the state that you're competing against. And then we can drill down, like I said, you know, to skill analysis. Related jobs is actually really kind of neat. You can see, okay, I'm hiring for, like I said earlier, this is all kind of connected to yesterday and to tomorrow. So you can kind of see, okay, yeah, this person worked in this field at one time, but does that translate to what I'm hiring for now? And what's that compensation look like? Where did my occupation go? Oh, we can drill down to a specific occupation. Rob used welding earlier. Let's see if I can get that up here. Again, I'm using all of Missouri right now, but we can drill down, like I said, to the metro area, to the county, to the city, whatever kind of analysis you're looking for. And I can see in Missouri right now, the demand is 593. Now, again, these are listed jobs. It doesn't count temporary jobs, things of that nature. These are actually listed jobs on the internet at somewhere. One thing that's kind of interesting that I like to look at too is easier to fill. That means it takes about 44 days to fill that position, to find the right candidate. So you can see, okay, if I'm putting an ad out now, or I'm doing creative recruiting right now, how long is it going to take me to fill this position? And for this specific occupation, it's about 44 days. And then we can look at over here what the salary is. And we do it by education again. Most welders are going to go through vocational school, trade training, rather than going to college necessarily. But then we can look at it by experience. and this is very important for a trade, is how many years have they been doing it. And then we can do the skills, and we can print all this off in a PDF, and it looks really nice and pretty, and it's easy to analyze. It's not a lot of work to just look at it and say, okay, I see what's going on here. Again, we can go through. And here's kind of an example of related jobs. So that's something that we have at hand. Again, if you're a client of the SBDC, this is at no cost. We can run these reports for you. We can help you analyze them, and we can provide them and help you make decisions. Any questions on that? Yeah.
I want to just add one quick thing about Burning Glass is, and I said this, and you alluded to this also. It's based on online job advertisements, and so if you are in an industry where people do not advertise online, or if you're in a geographic area where online jobs are less prevalent, then the information becomes a little bit less reliable. So it's something just to be cognizant of as you're looking through this. We ran into it. We were working on an ag workforce report, and one of the things we found is that ag employers across the board don't advertise online. And so there's a lot less information in that space than there is in IT, for example, right? And so IT employers do advertise online, so you're going to have some caveats like that. But yeah, it's a much better resource in terms of real-time demand and things like that than what I was showing you. But it does come at a cost, right? So if you're not an SBDC client, then it does come at a cost for you in terms of getting access to that information. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen here. You're seeing the PowerPoint again, right? All right. So, and I saw there was a question about this, and we wanted to spend the last part of our presentation kind of talking about creative compensation strategies, right? And we recognize that not everyone can pay, and so that's a conversation point for businesses, and that's what I would encourage you to think through as a business owner, is to think about where would you like to fit into that compensation structure and work towards that. And again, that's where your SBDC counselors and others are going to help you with that, can help you with that process. One of the things I think Mike and I see too often is people that end up either being they end up being low-paying employers, not by choice, but by accident, and they haven't thought through where they want to fit into that structure, right? So we would encourage that intentionality as a part of this here, but we encourage you then to think about how can you compete in other ways, right? And so we're going to talk about some different ways that we've seen businesses provide benefits and what that looks like here, and that can be, some of these are high cost, but some of these are low cost sort of things that you can do that can help help you structure your business in a way that it's a part of the compensation package in terms of what people want and what they like here. So creative benefits are the area that we hear the most, right? And what I like to call these creative benefits, they get a lot of press, they keep employees happy and focused on them as a total person. And you hear about this in Silicon Valley all the time, right? You hear about companies that are, Google or Facebook or whatever, that have the barbershop on site, and they provide employees bikes and scooters and skateboards to ride around their campus, and they have they have a pool table on every floor. A year ago, pre-pandemic, I toured a major airline headquarters, and they have an area where employees can go walk down, and they have a game room, right? They have that sort of stuff. So those are creative benefits that keep people engaged at work, but at the same time recognize that they also need other things, right? And so there are a lot of examples of these here, and they can be simple things like pet-friendly days, right? So if you're running a business that can have pets in that business, then is there a day that people can bring their dog to work? Other businesses sometimes offer massages after hours, on a Friday afternoon, whatever, they'll bring in a masseuse to give people massages. Vacation bonuses are increasingly popular. That we're going to give you a small bonus as you get ready to go on vacation, but to help you enjoy your time off. I've seen a lot of businesses, and these get a lot of press here, but surprise trips, right? Where a business has had a great year. And so what do? They take all 20 of their employees on a trip, on a cruise, or on something like that. Providing simple things like childcare for a date night as a parent of a child would be a welcome benefit, right? I saw one example, like companies are now providing spring breaks. They're like, people have gotten spring breaks throughout the rest of their life, so why can't we do those sort of things? So I say these are creative benefits, and they do cost, and but they are ways to build to provide benefits in ways that are not going to cost you, or they're going to cost you, but they provide value to employees in different ways, and they help create that culture, and they help to create that recognition that people are total employees and that they work, but they also have other lives, and those are things that you can do.
And I'll add to that, Rob, if you don't mind. And yeah, these are costs, but these are more of the kind of one-time costs. So, you're not paying taxes on the employee wages. You're not paying benefit. It's a one-time cost. Yeah, it's a little bit out of the pocket, of course, but it also adds that value, and that employee feels valued, and you're going to be able to help. It's going to help you retain that employee as well.
And by the way, I would always encourage a business that if they are doing some of these sort of things, as we talked about that recruitment funnel yesterday, that starting to build awareness of your place as a place of business as a place to work, and talk about that sort of stuff, and make sure that that information is shared, because that is things that people are looking for. The second area that we are talking about here is thinking about how you structure work, right? And the value that is provided in that structure. And are there ways to structure your work differently that employees will value, right? That's maybe not direct compensation in terms of pay and benefits, but it is a benefit for employees. And a couple of things that I've seen around over the years is people working not working 8 5-hour days, or 5 8-hour days, sorry, a week here. They're working their 40 hours over 3 days or 4 days or 4.5 days. Are there ways that you can structure that? I worked, again, when I worked in labor relations, we had a work group that they negotiated 4 10-hour days, and everybody loved it. The business found that on those days that the employees were more productive, so they got more work done on that time frame, because it was a county road crew, and they were having to go out from the shop to do the work and come back, and so it gave them more time to get the work done there. But the employees loved it because they were able then to have 3-day weekends every weekend. And so that there were benefits to that as a part of it there. My cousin works in nursing, and they, and healthcare, because they're 24-hour day, 7-day-a-week business. They negotiated her schedule so that even though her husband was living in a different part of the country, she worked in Kansas City. She worked she worked Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and then was off for 2 weeks as a part of that. So thinking through flexible schedules like that, and what does that work week look like? By law, the only rule out there is that you have to pay people for overtime if they're covered, when they work over 40 hours, but it doesn't say that you can't work that 40 hours in a day and a half or 2 days. So that's a key part of this. Second way about thinking about the structure of your work differently that employees value is remote work. And we've seen this for certain types of jobs that has become very prevalent now last year due to COVID, and thinking about how do you allow people to engage remotely is a key part of the conversation that's going on out there. That can be remote work as a permanent, 100% remote sort of operation there. But it could also be a hybrid schedule that 1 day a week or 2 days a week, people can work out of the office, but then they are expected to be there 2 or 3 days, the other 3 days a week sort of time frame there. And the other part then is thinking through flexible schedules. Again, these are not for every business, right? Because depending on what your business requirements are, you may not be able to offer these sort of benefits. But thinking through them, if somebody can come in and say, I can't be here until 10, but I'll work until 8. Okay, are they getting their time in? Are they doing the work that you need to have done there? And so thinking about how you structure that work, and there's a number of examples of these sort of creative activities that businesses are doing to try and provide value to employees that also keeps the productivity levels where they want. And particularly, I've seen this in businesses that are looking for other ways to compensate people besides direct payments and things like that. Another area here, are there what I would call other inexpensive benefits that you can provide that employees value? Going back to that county road crew that I worked with years ago, one of the benefits that those employees valued to no end was the ability to go into the shop and wash their vehicles, their private vehicle, at the wash bay that they had for the road crew trucks there. So they had access to it. They saw immense value in that, even though the cost of the county was pretty low there. So allowing, that's an example there. Another one that Mike and I have run across here in the state of Missouri is that giving people an annual allowance, your employees an annual allowance to visit your cabin at Table Rock or Lake of the Ozarks when you're not using it. So we had a business owner that they have a cabin, I think it was at Table Rock, if I'm not mistaken. They didn't use it every weekend,
Table Rock,
right?
yeah.
And so they didn't use it every weekend. And so they had a small shop, that not a huge number of employees, but they would let employees they would give employees access to that cabin on the weekend when they were not going to be using it there. So they would spread it around there, but that was an employee benefit. That was a cost that they were going to have regardless, right? They paid for the cabin, and when they're not using it, it was a benefit that they could give their employees there. I see things.
And
Go ahead, Mike.
No, I was going to say, if I remember correctly, it was kind of an employee of the month benefit, and I believe they also got a $500 gift card to spend while they were down there.
Yeah,
So,
and for their workforce, they had found. My memory is that they had found that a lot of the folks had never left the county that they had lived in, right? So the idea of going to Table Rock Lake was an exotic vacation for their workforce, and it was highly valued by the folks that they were working with there. Simple things like, if you have people with a work vehicle, allowing them to take that home is a perk that can be that's a form of compensation, right? Because then you don't have to have the vehicle to drive back and forth to work as a part of this. I've seen companies providing paid volunteer days that talks about the values that they have as a company, but also gives people a little bit of a change of pace and an activity that they can engage in for what they are doing here. And then the final sort of area that I would say for a creative compensation strategy is to think about giving employees a stake in the product or the outcome. And these can be profit-based bonuses. My wife worked at a company where at the end of the year, you never knew what the amount was going to be. You kind of knew a ballpark, but they gave at the end of the year, they gave a bonus to employees off of the profits that they had made that year, and that was compensation, but it was based on how well the company had done. And so employees came to hope for it and look for it, but it was also something that depended on performance for them to be able to do. In the movie industry, I call these back end deals, like, right, and there was a story I was telling Mike yesterday that Samuel L. Jackson at one point in time was one of the highest paid actors out in Hollywood, and it wasn't because he made a lot of money on the front end. They didn't say we're going to pay you $20 million a picture, but he had negotiated deals that he would make a percentage of the profits of those pictures there, and he would and because of that, movies like Pulp Fiction and all the other things he was on 25 years ago, he was making money off of that work still today. And so thinking about that, are there products that you can develop and you can give somebody a portion of the profits that are made from the work that they are doing there? And then we already talked about this briefly, but this is not as common in Missouri, but are there ways to think about equity in the business, right? And it doesn't have to be a high percentage, but it gives, through an employee stock ownership program or something like that, it gives employees some equity in the company and allows them to benefit directly from the profitability of that company. And that's particularly, you're going to see that in companies that are startups, that are in small businesses, and you see it in bigger businesses too, right? But you see that as an alternative form of compensation for somebody that otherwise maybe can't afford to pay the going wage rate, but the idea that, hey, you're going to get some money down the road based on the work we're doing is a key part of it here too. The final thing I just would encourage you to do and to pay attention to is, if you have employees, ask them, and if you have prospective employees, ask them what they value and what they want. That's going to be a key insight for you there. Have that as a part of a conversation. It can be, if we were to hire you, what would you prioritize in terms of these areas here? But talking about what they value, what is it that and this fits into our conversation yesterday about really thinking through what keeps your employees there, what do they look for, thinking about what is that value that they have, because you might be surprised. You might find that they want a competitive salary, but they don't need to be paid highest in the industry, but they really value having great health insurance. One of the things working at the University of Missouri that, and universities on the whole have done is they have provided great benefits and great leave policies and things like that, and employees stay with them because of those benefits and policies, even though compensation, if you look at it as a national market, is oftentimes a bit below average in terms of what you would expect in those areas there. Now, people get paid well, they aren't living poorly, but employees value different things like that. So asking your employees and your prospective employees what they value and what they want is a key part of the equation there. So, the other thing, just be creative. Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Sorry, I was just going to add to that, one thing to keep in mind is that sometimes employees will be a little bit afraid to be honest about what they want and what they value. So you need to kind of be upfront. You want to be upfront about, okay, please let me know, what you're thinking, because it can be kind of a scary you know, they want to keep their job or they want to get the job. And so maybe they're not going to be as upfront as you would like them to be. So just kind of make that a value that says, you know, I need you to be honest with me, kind of thing.
And the final thing I'll say, you know, Sean, I've heard him speak before. Sean Askinosie, who's the founder of Askinosie Chocolates in Springfield, talks very much about being transparent. He believes in open books. And so as he's running his small business down there, he talks that, you know, he's very open with his employees about, here's how we're doing financially, here's how you're contributing to our bottom line, and here's how we're going to share with you what that means down the road. So having that transparency oftentimes is a key part of the buy-in and helps employees understand what you're trying to do and how you're structuring compensation going forward too. So are there any questions?
Brooke, did we answer your question?
Rob and Mike, I just want to say that this was so informative. I can't tell you how many questions I get about, well, if I can't afford to pay, you know, competitively or above that, what else can I do? And we have to do a lot of brainstorming, because sometimes it takes a lot to kind of look at your own company or your own business and say, hey, I can actually offer these unique things to my employees. So all of the ideas that you guys had and all of the great examples are so useful. And I really, really appreciate you guys putting on this webinar for us today. Very informative.
Well, I'll say Rob did the brunt of the work on the one today. So I'll take a little of the credit.
Yeah.
We've worked on it in the past, but today. But Lauren, you know, it's what you guys do as well is working with those businesses to help them kind of shape their business model so that they can be competitive in creative ways. And that's very, very important as well.
Oh yeah, definitely. It was just, you guys just touched on so many just different examples and situations that business owners, you know, have to think about and don't really think about it until it's too late or they're in a bind or some type of crunch and they need to get people hired. So again, this was super informative and thank you so much.
The other thing I'll just add, we didn't talk about this, but, you know, working with you all, Lauren, and others to understand what the cost of turnover is and for businesses and the cost of hiring. Because, you know, there's some research out there, but you can calculate this for your own business, and it's how much time are you going to be putting in there and what is that taking away from when you are doing hiring. And oftentimes what businesses will find is that that cost of turnover is higher than they expect, and they can actually then, if they can reduce turnover, they can actually offer better wages, better benefits, and things like that. And so understanding that cost as a part of your business is a key part of the conversation too.
Yeah, something that gets lost in that is it's not just the cost of the new employee, but it's the cost of the supervisor that has to train that employee and they're not doing their own job. You know, so that you're losing productivity on that side as well. That's something that gets lost. So it is very, very high cost on turnover.
All right, guys. Was there any other questions for Rob or Mike today?